Cool. All right. So thank you everybody for joining. My name is Aaron Martledge. I'm going to be the host of the Friends of Figma San Diego chapter here and get things started. And then I'll hand it off to Kelly and our panel. Just to kind of make some quick introductions. Myself and Michelle, we run the San Diego chapter of Friends of Figma. I would highly recommend, if you haven't joined the chapter, it's free. Join. There's a link here in the Fig Jam. It's a community where we're just trying to make it easier for people to connect with other designers in the UX UI space who like Figma, who use Figma. So join that. It's the official chapter in San Diego from Figma, and we've been doing this for about 7 months now. And this is our second panel. We're excited to have everybody. And then I just want to make a quick announcement where our next event will be December 9th. That's a Thursday. It'll be Essential Plugins. Michelle is going to host that. And it'll be a chance for a bunch of different participants to share their favorite plugins that they use in Figma and FigJam and kind of do a quick demo. So it'll be a great little show and tell. That'll be an hour virtual session in December. But this will be our last panel for the year. And then we'll be looking for some other events. At the end of this, you'll get an email. Please, it'd be great if you can fill in the survey that we just are always looking for feedback to make it better. So please, if you don't mind, if just filling in the survey, that'd be great. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kelly. And Kelly, you can do your own intro and then introduce the panel. So thanks so much.
Sounds good. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is Kelly. I am a senior product designer at Microsoft. And I'm located in Dana Point, California, which is sort of in between Irvine and San Diego. And actually, I met Aaron through Friends of Figma because I was hosting the Irvine chapter. And I stepped down from that once life got kind of busy, but Aaron looped me back into this San Diego chapter. So here I am, and thank you, Aaron, for including me here. So I guess a little bit more about myself. I've been with Microsoft for only about 5 months now. And before that, I was at a design agency called Wonderful. And so in working in an agency setting, it was, designing a lot of products for a lot of different clients. And now that I'm at Microsoft, I've kind of transitioned into working in Figma at scale. So, working with the design system that's being used by so many different products and maintaining something super massive. So that's me. And now we'll go ahead and introduce our panelists. Aaron, if you could, yeah. So Jeremy, we have here first from Intuit. Hi, Jeremy.
Hello, how's it going? Thanks for the introduction. So I have been with Intuit for about 1.5 years. I'm a principal product designer. I worked on the design system team for about 8 months, and now I work on Credit Karma and TurboTax, kind of like cross-pollinating. And before that, I was actually at HP, and Megan and I were co-workers. We were co-designers, so it's kind of fun to be on a panel with her here. And so I guess since I just talked about Megan, I'll pass the mic to her.
Thanks. Yeah. Megan Landry. I work at HP. There I am. Lead product designer. I'm currently on CRM, but I have touched just about every single touch point we have, from the app to our website to our portal, which is our back-end account system. And I help establish our design system and then, still manage parts of it, but we'll get into all of that later. But yeah, nice to meet you guys.
Okay, next.
Oh, I have to pass it off to Ty.
Okay, there we go.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I am currently a senior UX designer at AWS Training and Certification. Prior to that, I was at eBay, and then prior to that, I was at Intuit. And the last 2 jobs I've had, my current one and at eBay, I worked in design systems a lot. At eBay, I worked on a classifieds product that had multiple markets and it used the same design system. And at AWS, I'm working on doing a simpler version of the AWS because I'm in a very simpler space, training and certification versus the more complex AWS spaces. So I'm trying to do a subset. So that's kind of how I've been involved in using Figma. And I'll pass it off to Pamela.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pamela Olomola. I work at ServiceNow as a UX UI design manager, and I also lead a foundation that specializes in training people on design. I have worked with ServiceNow for almost 9 years now, first in England and now in the USA. I'm
Awesome.
glad to be here and thank you so much. Let me pass on to
Me, I'll take it back.
back to you, Kelly.
Thanks,
Okay.
Pamela. Okay, so I guess the last couple of things we'll point out here in the Figma, the FigJam file that all of you are inside of right now, we have the schedule. And then if you scroll over a little to the right, we have this awesome sticky note area where you can tell us about yourself. So please make a little card. You can use a sticky note or this little cooler version. Put a photo, tell us where you're from, whatever you want. It's really great for networking, just to see who else is here. And then if we scroll over a little more to the right, we have questions for the panel. So definitely write a question here. We would love to answer them. We have some time reserved at the end. I think we have like 15 or 20 minutes. So we'll answer those at the end. And until then, we have some questions already prepared for you. So that's that. All right, so let's get started here with, since we're inside of FigJam, let's start talking about that first. And I know Figma just launched some new features. So I'll start with you, Ty. How do you utilize FigJam within your organization? And then also all the other panelists can chime in on this as well, but I'll start with Ty.
Okay, yeah, for me, I like the main focus I have outside of some of the design system work is in like authentication and identity. So I use FigJam a lot actually just for diagramming architectural things. I think it's great for showing like relationships of how things relate from a technical standpoint and even from strategy, like because a lot of concepts in that domain are really complicated. And so I've used it a lot just to kind of have working sessions to kind of diagram out concepts around authentication and use that to put into documents so people can understand better how that works. So yeah, I've actually, most of my work has been around that and not anything other, like anything visual. It's mainly just like organizing ideas and showing how they connect.
That's really cool. I actually haven't heard many people using it that way. How about the others? Does anyone else use it a lot for their company?
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask Ty a follow-up question. Do you collaborate in FigJam or is it mostly to organize your own thoughts?
I do both. So I kind of think in diagrams anyways. I think if anyone who's worked with me knows that. And so I do that to record my thoughts in terms of just so I can understand stuff. But I also, when I have working sessions, like let's say if I'm trying to understand how like login expiration works across the different types of identity stacks and things, when I'll diagram those out and I'll talk to a developer. So we kind of work through that together with the product owner because like otherwise it'll get too technical and like no one will understand it. So I use it a lot for that.
Yeah, I personally use it as well, both ways. I will like to organize my own thoughts, like kind of as a digital paper sort of analogy. But then also my immediate team, we use it as kind of a step one to like collaborate on just, new ideas and wireframing, and then a lot of competitive research as just like a catch-all place to dump ideas. And then we'll move more into like a specific project and create files and pages.
Yeah, I forgot to mention competitive research is a big one. Like I use it to do competitive audits. So like when it was one of the things I work with too is like Amazon has like a ton of different design systems even within the same org. Don't ask me why. But so I use it just to do an audit like of components and stuff and to make a decision on like, does it make sense? Like, like why there's so many and to try to consolidate, or if I do competitive audits for, if I'm researching like a type of component or like say like a navigation, right? I can just audit a bunch of different things and keep it in one place. And I use that to facilitate like a workshop so we can kind of narrow.
Jeremy, we're going to jump in.
I was actually just going to call out how fun it is to see everyone's cursors moving around. I think that's one of my favorite features of Figma is just see it's almost like we're all in the same place and we're working on the same board together, but you know, it's virtual. It's all just through the web, but it's such a great, like, almost like team building. So we actually don't use FigJam on our team that much, but I love Figma and can talk about it at length. And this is one of my favorite features. So that's all.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess I can add to the FigJam conversation and say that for me, I usually use it a lot of times when I'm working with project managers to kind of document what the proper user flow should be before we get into anything too visual, since a lot of times that can be distracting. So yeah, this is cool. I wasn't expecting all these different answers. So Pamela or anyone else want to add anything else, or should I?
Yeah, I was just, as you were talking, I just thought about how we use it a lot these days to replace PowerPoint, meaning that a lot of the times I can actually walk through almost as if I'm walking through a PowerPoint presentation using FigJam. And I think that's pretty interesting. Oh no, that's Figma. And then we also have one thing that I think is so critical, using it for explaining our processes. So we have people across the company who are stakeholders. They want to know what's our process. So they find it very easy to navigate within FigJam and show us those indicators. And so once we display that, they can understand everything we do, but more importantly, they can contribute and attribute to it, which we were not able to do so well with PowerPoint. So I just wanted to put that there.
I think that's really interesting that you bring up, you know, external people working inside of Figma. I know that FigJam now allows people to come in, whether they're a big Figma user or not. But as far as, I guess this brings up another question I actually have, which is, you know, when you work with other people who are not designers, like, well, I guess, you know, content writers are designers of their own right, but people who aren't actually like pushing pixels all the time in Figma, how do you loop them into your Figma environment in a way that, you know, everyone can work efficiently together without breaking things or whatever? So I guess I would probably be more curious about the content writers specifically. You know, like, do you make them their own sandbox, or how does that relationship work? I guess I'll open the floor to whoever maybe works closely with content.
Yeah. Okay, go on.
Oh, I was gonna say, you can, okay, I'll go then. I work we have a content, Intuit calls them content designers. And we have, I have a small team, and one of the other teammates is a content designer. And the other is another designer, like visual / UI UX designer. And we basically don't, like, most of the stakeholders and most of the people that aren't designers don't even have edit access to any of the files. Everybody has view and comment access. And so that's mostly how we manage the workflow. So a lot of what we do has to get approved by the legal teams. And actually, since Credit Karma's somewhat of a different entity, it's still owned by Intuit, but it was acquired about 2.5 years ago. And there's still different legal teams and different marketing teams. And so we have different marketing teams, 2 different legal teams, 2 different banks, all in the same files. And you know, everyone can comment. And so that's mostly how we do our workflows is comments and responding. And the only people that can really edit are like a small handful of us, just like maybe 3 or 4 people. So
for HP, traditionally we have, because of previous tools that we've used, not throwing anyone under the bus, but they were limiting, and it was always a huge hurdle to get alignment within those tools. So our copywriters were forced to create copy decks externally in Google or what have you. And so that's our our source of truth. That's our final source of truth that we share out with partners. But some of our really good copywriters are now able to get into Figma and update the screens and then ping us within Figma as a comment like, hey, and then we also use Jira. So they'll also add us in Jira and leave a comment like, hey, all the screens, all of your breakpoints, everything is updated with the copy. You're welcome. And it's amazing. And we've never been able to do that before. So
That's
I
awesome.
love Figma for that.
Yeah, I think for us at Microsoft, most of the content designers do have added access, or at least the ones that I've worked with. I know, Microsoft's huge, but my team specifically, we do have content writers in there. And usually what I do is I'll create a separate page, like a duplicate of whatever the latest design is, and call it that person's sandbox. And so then they can go in there and edit anything without breaking whatever the latest version of the design is. Anyone else?
I was going to say, I know that.
ServiceNow.
Sorry, go ahead, Pamela.
Jeremy, we're after each other today. Okay,
we're in the same minds. That's it.
Yeah, same minds. I just wanted to just chip in that we've not, in my team, which is a training and certification org, we've not explored the sandbox. And what we've been doing is granting the access, just like what Kelly mentioned earlier on. So we grant that access, and then content writers are able to go in there and do what they need to do. However, there is an onboarding process attached to that, and simply because a lot of people are still very new to the product itself. But what I have found extremely useful is the fact that we can version. So despite that we believe everybody knows what they're doing in the file and would do the right thing, I think knowing that there is the ability to go back several versions of that file gives us that freedom when we are handing over that access to the content writers. I'm not sure I would be bold enough to do it without knowing that we could revert.
I was actually going to say something similar, which was, I know that Figma has content revision, like history and the ability to revert. We don't use it that way, but I know it's there. So I think that's something that we can probably get better at on our end. Yeah, so the revision history is a nice safety net.
Yeah, definitely. I guess while we're on the topic of collaboration, Megan, question for you. Given the size of your company, how do you collaborate with your team of designers and engineers remotely during COVID?
Ooh, well, I guess, so HP has about 50,000 employees, I believe. And then all of our design team overall has about 120. So even before COVID, we were working collaboratively remotely because they're all over the world. I every day work with people all over the world. And so you can ideally, I'd like rather be face to face and just, we've all been there, right? We get emails and then it can go back and forth for forever, or you can jump on a call and figure it out in like 10 minutes. We also have Teams, that's what we use. And so you can message, and then we have like other tools like Jira and things like that. So we collaborate using a variety of tools, but the best, and to Jeremy's point about the fun little avatar cursors everywhere, that's one of my most favorite and reliable tools in Figma, that if you're on a Zoom call with someone, you can just open that up, tap on their name, and then and see exactly where they are, and you don't have to actually share your screen. It cuts down on a lot of thrash there. That's my favorite way to collaborate. It's the quickest and easiest way. We also use FigJam for collaboration, because then you don't even need to get into a Zoom call. Like you just kind of, okay, I shared a bunch of stuff, go in there, make comments. It's super fun and easy. My teammate Arena and I, we do that. And so those are my favorite ways to collaborate, but you know, it requires a host of tools. And for large teams like HP, yeah, it's just easier to jump into Figma and share your cursor. That's my favorite way.
Nice. Yeah. I feel like that's the easiest, just to say, follow me in Figma. And then
Right?
I hate it when
Exactly.
people are spying on me though.
I know, I do that too. Because you're like, oh, what are you working on? And who are you? Do you ever do the one where you're like, I don't know your name.
Yeah, exactly.
What are
like,
you
why are you in
looking
my
at?
file? This file isn't for you.
Yep.
Yep, totally. Goes
Never
both
heard of you.
ways.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I guess on the topic of new features, you know, something that I personally am very curious about and you know, try to understand is when Figma comes out with all these new features, because they're always launching new stuff. And like today, they just came out with prototyping variants, I believe, which they had a beta version for, which I was actually using. And once you start using new features, how do you or your teams sort of all start using them together? Like, how do you get everyone else on board? Because like, for example, this new feature that just came out with prototyping variants, like if only I am using it, but the rest of the team isn't using it, then we're not aligned, and you know, it kind of slows us down. So how do you get everyone on board with the new tools so that you can keep the team being efficient?
I have a lot to say about this, but I just answered the last one. So I'm going to let other people go first.
I tend to encourage a lot of experimentation with new beta features actually within my team, whichever of the teams it is. And it's simply because by not being afraid of using these tools, I believe that the features are still workable, even though they're workable in Figma. Waiting for that point where you absolutely need it is what I try to discourage us from looking at, but encourage us during our sessions. We normally have brainstorming sessions and talking about what's new and how could we improve our processes. So during our processes conversations, these are the kind of topics that I like to bring forward. For instance, towards the end of every year, we sit down and we look at how could we save time across everything that we do. And that even includes our Microsoft tools. How can we save time? What do we need to learn and know in order to encourage everybody else? And that's how we look at this holistically, and where possible, can we integrate actions to happen with an integration with Microsoft using the Power App tools and the Automate tools. So for us, how we look at it is we love to estimate how much time we spend doing whatever we're doing every week. And once we are able to attach an amount of time, quantify an amount of time that we spend doing a particular activity, what we encourage ourselves to do is, how can we automate this? How can this be shorter? How can Power Automate or any other tool that we have there help us to make this simpler? And then we now go into what are we designing with, what are we communicating with, and how do we make everything seamless? So for instance, if somebody goes into Figma or FigJam and makes a comment, we could either turn on our notifications or we could decide to trigger a notification to another stakeholder. And that thereby encouraging the approval process and the involvement process in a way that we don't have to go after these other stakeholders and initiate those conversations. Now, that might sound like, well, how much time are you saving? But when we put pen to paper and we calculated the time across of a team of many stakeholders, you're looking at saving at least 200 hours. And that is kind of useful for us. So that's how we think of it.
That's awesome. Megan, you wanted to jump in too?
I guess I don't know how to eloquently say this, but having a major role in onboarding our whole team into Figma and being, responsible for providing tutorials and training and all of that, and seeing that, like, for the most part, people won't do that. Right? But the fact that to Pamela's point, it was like, encourage training. You really just have to like get in there and play with any of those new tools. That is the only way that you're going to do it. So, or to learn it. And so we host regular tutorials like, hey, there's this great new feature. And then you kind of bait them with how fun it could be, and then encourage them as much as possible to like get in there and play with it. But that's really the only way to learn a new tool, is to open up Figma or whatever program it is and like use it,
Do you
That's
do like a lunch and learn, like an optional thing, or is it like, hey, everyone on my team, you have to start using this?
No, we'll do like either it's I go through a new tool and do a tutorial, or do like kind of a roundtable. Does anyone have any Figma questions? And then people will say like, yeah, I don't know how to do this in Figma. Can you cover that? Or some designers, like last week, we do a weekly. And so some designers will be like, I'm noticing that no one's using this tool. I'm going to give a tutorial, and then people are like, oh, thank you. That was great. And so we do it a variety of different ways. So it's nice.
We have like, I think it's less formal for us, where I'll be like, we do a lot of work where like we're Zooming, like we're on a Zoom call, and then we're also working together. And I'll see like one of my co-designers do something, and I'm like, how did you just do that? Or I'll be like, I have one for you that I just learned. So it's a lot of like word of mouth. Actually, it's funny that this came up, because one of the things that I'm supposed to do, like there's different like sort of obligations, I guess, at the different levels of design, and at principal they want you to be like helping grow the design community. And so one of the things that I was going to do is set up like a class to teach something. So I was like, what can I teach? And I decided that actually tips and tricks of Figma, like top 20 things that you don't know about Figma, would be like a really fun one. And I've already started putting things together when I'm talking to people, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't know how to do that. Like, what was one I just discovered recently, and it was like a game changer. Oh, for example, where you guys like moved, resized an artboard and all the components just get squished? Have you tried that? And because it defaults for some reason to basically scaling objects within a frame, and just a couple quick settings and you can change it so it just doesn't do that. And it just saves so much time, because you can copy everything from the frame, instead of copying everything from the frame, moving it out of the frame, resizing the frame and putting it back. Like you can just do it in like 2 moves. So
Jeremy,
for us,
if you need any new ideas, Google like Figma key commands.
oh
It's
no,
like
I have a list
so
of, I have like
helpful.
web pages of like the best tips, and I'm just going through them. And so my next step is to like put a long list together and have people on Slack kind of give a survey response of which ones they want to learn. So in short, it's a lot of word of mouth for us, but then I think occasionally there's something more formal where like we do something like a lunch and learn, and we'll be teaching it. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of trial and error, especially with like, I remember when auto layout came out and I just wanted to auto layout everything. And then, sometimes when you make a container and you need to anchor certain things on the side rather than putting them in an auto layout. And it's just like, you don't necessarily know the right way to build it until you are in the situation of having to build it. And then you flex it and it breaks and then you figure it out. But yeah,
Totally.
I think it's really interesting to see, and how they're even fixing that and pushing out all these new features to fix that. is cool too.
Mm.
Ty, I want to ask you a question. So when it comes to design systems at scale, which is the topic of today, how do you build a multi-brand design system with Figma?
Yeah, so this one I have a lot of experience from my last job at eBay. So as I mentioned, like eBay, we were part of eBay Classifieds, which is not part of eBay anymore. But what it was like this, our team was responsible for creating like the design system and the components for all these classified apps that were used across the globe. So, you know, there would be a market in Australia and they would have their own logo, they would have their own typefaces, they would have their own color palette. And then there would be one in like, you know, Canada and one in Spain. And so all the components work the same way, but each app had its own visual language, right? And so one of the things we did, I think that the way to set it up is to isolate all these libraries so that you want to like, you know, set up a specific type library, you know, for this brand and a specific one for this brand. And so you kind of break them out so they're modular. That way you can always swap them, right? Like you can say like, I want to use the type library and the color palette from this brand. And so like that way you have like a central library of components, and then everyone else in the different markets can use that library and they can just switch out, right? So when I was at eBay, we were still using Sketch and then we moved over to Figma. But you know, like Figma, you can use like Themer, or you can now like you can just natively swap out the library. And so that's kind of what I did at AWS too. Like you can do that with like dark mode, right? You can make a color palette that's a regular default color palette. You can make a dark mode color palette and just switch out. That way you don't have to worry about like. So I think like long story short, if you keep all these things that are modular separate, there's things you'll never change, right? Like if you have a type scale or you have like a layout, you know, library, like you can keep those stable and you don't have to change them. Like icons, you know, that was another thing. eBay, the different companies had completely different icons. So like it seems like a pain when you have a bunch of them fragmented, but the nice thing is that when you're making an update, especially for something that big, like if I had it all in one library and I made an update, like everybody would get it, right? And it's kind of silly, right? Because like all the markets would get it. Whereas if you keep them separate, if you're just updating like this country's color palette or this country's icons, that's like it's a lot cleaner that way. And that's like if you're working at a small company, you don't need to worry about that. If you're working at like a large company where you have to manage all these different things, it's better to fragment it and break it up. And so you can isolate the things you're changing a lot, and the things you're not changing a lot doesn't matter. It stays stable.
Yeah, I want to add to that. When I was on the design system team, I was there right when we started using Figma. So we had to rebuild all the components in Figma, and Intuit has a couple brands. There's Mint and TurboTax. There's like Intuit brand colors too. There's QuickBooks, now Credit Karma, and then, well, as of like a week ago, like MailChimp, but that's not part of the design system yet. But basically what we would do is we would build these Intuit like corporate wide components, or what did we call them? Primitives. So like buttons, for example, with a certain corner radius. And then everything, all the other design systems would use those as their parent primitives, and then inherit any of those sort of core changes as they would happen. But like each of the design systems like has their own color palette. And so you essentially just override what comes from those parent components in your own design system. And then when somebody who's on like the Intuit design team would make a change, everybody obviously inherits those changes. Like if we changed it from 6 pixel corner radii to like 4, you know, everybody gets that, and the look is just immediately updated. Like another amazing quality of Figma. But yeah, so basically the way we did it was have sort of a hierarchy of nested components that inherit intentionally, like programmatically inherit sort of the higher up component features.
Nice. Yeah, I'm actually really curious now that variants are in the picture. How have those impacted any of your design systems? Like I know, for example, I'm starting to see at Microsoft before, you'd have different states of a certain component and they were all separate components, but now we're starting to try to reshape those into variants so that in the actual design panel on the right, it's much easier to switch things out and change states. But that's like a whole, big, huge overhaul in itself. So how is that impacting your companies? Or have you guys kind of?
Mostly it's just a housekeeping thing on my end, because I mean, it's so much faster to A, find things, and then B, when you're in the process of designing something, to just plug it in and then change the variant of it instead of like go back and find a whole new component, right? So it's really just, it's cleaner and it's so much faster. I love variants. Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you guys see the interactive components rollout?
Yes,
Yeah.
haven't had a chance to play with it.
We
yet,
haven't
though.
either. Yeah, I
Oh.
just saw
played
that
with it a
today.
lot.
You have?
It looks fun.
Is it as amazing and awesome as
Yeah,
it sounds?
I've been using it since it was in beta, so before it even came out.
Nice.
Which was actually interesting. I was just talking with someone I work with, and I didn't realize, because I had the beta version, that when I was in, so I would prototype, like, let's say I made a rest state of a button, hover, selected, and then I would just prototype it at the component level so that I never had to do all of those little micro interactions with the whole frame itself. But once I started doing that, I forgot that everyone else didn't have it. And so people would try to go edit the different states and they couldn't because they didn't have it, but now it's public. I think today it came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I'm really curious to see how that will play a role in design systems, because when you have a bunch of different subsystems and they might not all have the same hover state, for example, depending on the product within the larger umbrella, like how that will impact the design systems. Does anyone else have any comments on the variants and how they're?
Yeah, I was gonna say I use variants for everything, like as much as I just can't find a bad reason when not to use it. Like if they're semantically the same thing, right? Like if it's a concept of a button or a card and there's different semantic variants of them, right? Like it just makes sense because it kind of forces you to put the intentional thought behind what the thing is. And so, and if you can't do that, then obviously, it doesn't make sense as a variant, but I think I try to do that as much as possible because I think, as Megan was saying, it's just it's cleaning your system up as you go, as you're creating more things and without adding more clutter. So I try to use them same with Autolay. I try to use it as much as I can.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Pamela, I have a question for you, if you have an answer for it. Where do you draw the line between sticking to the existing design system that your team uses and allowing the designers to kind of explore a little bit more and create new things, so that everything is still aligned, but also there's room for exploration? Or you can nominate someone else.
Yes, by consensus, we always aim to stay within the design system. However, we encourage the use of base atoms when designing or atomic design thinking. And I know there's a lot of thoughts about that topic on its own out there, but the way I see it is, if we can think taking into consideration the atomic, molecular, and page state as part of how we look at the systems, then when we have our regular design governance meetup, we kind of have show and tell sessions. The new designs, that the ideas and the concepts that the designers are coming up with is now part of a conversation, because here is what I believe is critical. Getting buy-in is not as hard as we sometimes think. It's how we approach getting people to buy into a concept or into an idea. And so we come at this from the direction of our designers are thinking of introducing these new new elements into the design system, but we don't just do it and dump it on people and say, what do you think? We actually engage that conversation right from the atomic state. This is what we're thinking, and we actually articulate the design decisions to the people that attend these governance meetup events. And that has been very successful in, I feel it's been quite successful in helping the acceptance of some of these elements to be included into what we have. But then again, we are not, once more, the main product team. We are a training organization. So we have a bit more control to that extent. However, we always make sure that in a way, whatever we are adding at the atomic state is aligned to the corporate brand. That's something that we try to stick to, simply because we have seen too many incidents, too many occasions where, in the interest of being creative, we sometimes see some designs cause concern for users. So we do respect the design system, and we are methodical about how we engage in adding to it as well as enhancing it. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's such a great, such a great answer. I find that hard myself designing, you know, sometimes I don't find exactly what I'm looking for in the design system. I'm like, maybe I should make something new, maybe not. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of checks and balances when it comes to making sure whatever it is that you're designing actually follows the design system. And there has to be a really good reason to create something new, usually for us.
Hey,
How about
Kelly? Pamela just had something that just reminded me, like a good thought that I had. I think like the way I think of it too is like especially if you're in a complex org, like setting up the foundational stuff that's more stable and doing it the right way is really key, right? Because that should be like the foundation of your house, and it should be super clear and how it's defined, like your color should be defined semantically and all that stuff. Because if you wait and don't do that, you could build out a component library that is like, 800 components, and you never mapped all your colors over to semantic colors, and you set yourself up for like a world of hurt. So I think I think what Jeremy was mentioning about like the primitives, like all those basic things that are the foundation, like having a clear, organized foundation, and it shouldn't really change a whole lot, right? Like, and those are things where those should be stable. And like, as you add more complex components, because those are more complex, there's a little more leeway, but I would definitely like urge against breaking, like having a good foundation set up and not like unless you need to add another color and you have a very strong reason for doing it, like those are a much more like dangerous than like if you're going to create like a really complex component that is not really, like there's not as much things you can break in terms of those connections. So like the primitive foundational stuff should be stable. So I just kind of reminded me when Pamela was talking about that.
Yeah, totally, Kelly. That actually, it gets like back to the very first question that you asked, which was like, how do you collaborate with your team of designers remotely? It all stems from having that foundation that Ty was just mentioning. Like, you have to have a solid, like, established structure for Figma, and then design system within Figma. And then you can work at different times. You can work not even like, being in a Zoom call or whatever. And at that foundation, because you've been set up for success, everything that you create is going to look branded and cohesive. And, as long as you have these parameters established.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think that's something really interesting as we're talking at scale, where, Microsoft, for example, and I'm sure Ty, similar for you, is, well, for all of you, that we have those core building blocks that don't change, that are the thing, that the backbone that keeps everything consistent. But then we do have other, every product has its own needs, and where we get into those more complex components, usually there's a little bit more leeway of like, we need it to function this way, so we'll add a new thing to this particular products library, but it doesn't impact the baseline library at all. Jeremy, do you have anything to add on that note?
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit in conflict, which is we'll use the components. We use the library like to help us like basically be efficient with design. But I, maybe for better or for worse, don't hesitate to make new things as I need them. I think most of what we do just falls into like, you know, it's form elements or like an image or like, you know, typesetting. And so like 99% of it is going to just be in the design system anyway. But when there's a need for something that's new, like I don't hesitate to just design something as needed. And if usually the dev teams can like build it. It depends. There's a couple platforms that it depends on. Like if it's part of the core TurboTax components, there isn't much wiggle room. But there's a bunch of screens that aren't really part of that, and so if they're sort of outside, if what we need to build is not in the design system, or the design system component may not have built like as well as it could, so it's like it might be auto layout and we have to stretch it and it's not working and it's like the text isn't wrapping right, like I'll just detach it. I'm just gonna say it. I'll detach the component and I'll modify as needed. And you know, that can be scandalous, I know. But that's what we do. We kind of move fast, and some of the teams are much more methodical and like, you know, have to be like tied in with the process and the components. But we move really fast. Sometimes like they just don't exist and there isn't time to go through the vetting process of building a new component that's part of the system. The way Intuit kind of structures it though, we have that flexibility, so you are allowed to go off and do what you need. And if it's something that you think other people are probably going to use, you can contribute it up to the system. And so you basically would like submit it for review, you know, by, I don't know, the system keepers. And then they would decide if it was like something that was worth building, and then they would build it. But I think the design system, I don't know, maybe it's a culture thing or you know, management or however you want to do it. But I think it's important for helping you be efficient and fast. But like in terms of it being a constraint, like I sort of push on that a little bit. So I challenge the design teams to like, you know, do new things. So yeah,
That's
be bold.
Yeah, and I think like the more you get into composite components, they're actually meant to be broken, right? Because like Figma can only cover so much. Like if you have a really complex component like a data table, right? Like you can't really add or, you know, like more rows if it doesn't exist. So like a lot of times what I've done for composite components is I'll just put like a little scissor emoji at the end of the name. So like the designers that use it know that, yeah, this is a starter component. It's meant to be broken because like obviously you can't build it, so they can, you know, like they might need to add more columns or they might need to remove columns. And so like the foundation is generally stable. Like the more composite ones are actually, you want to have those to be flexible so people can work, and then as well as like the guidelines should be a little less rigid on those as well.
Yeah, I think this question actually we had come up from the Schema conference that was recently. I think they talked about this, and Netflix was answering this question as far as, you know, governance versus allowing people to kind of explore. And it is interesting. I mean, every company has their own kind of policy when it comes to that, but I find myself personally, you know, I'm kind of on the same page as Jeremy, where if I need to make something, I'll do it. If it's a larger component that doesn't fit what we already have. But then I'll try to, you know, I'll always search the libraries and make sure it doesn't already exist. So
that was an amazing event, by the way. And if there is any way that, I mean, if you're interested, I would just highly recommend people checking out the recording of that. I don't know if they were allowing people, I know they were limited capacity for the live event, but if Figma is sharing the recording of that, highly recommend everyone to go and listen to it. It was really good.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And I remember that Netflix one was my favorite topic for that whole event.
Oh yeah, actually, that reminds me. Do your companies have any plugins that you've created specifically for your companies? I know Netflix had one, so it made me think of that.
Yeah, we don't. HP doesn't. Not that
I
I'm
think
aware.
I think there were some experimental ones that are being built with the AI team, the futures team, and what I saw was like a very early prototype of something where it would like generate like marketing headlines based on like machine learnings and what was successful. So I don't know if that was actually ever like deployed or published for public use, but it was kind of cool. It was kind of a neat use case of it, but it's not. I don't think there's too many public Intuit plugins that I know of, at least.
Nice. I think we have like a content reel one that I use a lot, just for
That's cool.
generating random names and email addresses and things. Let's see, actually, we're almost at time to check some of the audience questions. Let's see here. I'm just taking a look here at all of the sticky notes everyone left. How about, ooh, this is a good question. So anyone can answer this. Does anyone have advice for being the only designer in a company developing the design system in Figma for the larger product and team? I can answer that, but anyone else go first?
You should just answer it.
Okay. Yeah, so when I was working at Wonderful, which is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a design agency, we had a lot of startup clients come to us who didn't have any design system whatsoever. And so, you know, in addition to figuring out what the product needed to be and actually designing it, we would create each client their own design system. And a lot of time, like, we were a really small team, so I've created design systems by myself. And it's hard because you really are at that foundational stage where you need to think to how it might scale. But I think the best thing to get started that I always do, just like out of habit, whenever we got a new client, was create the typography style guide, create the colors, save all of those as styles, and make sure you're happy with them. So that once you actually do start creating smaller things like buttons, you already have the text, you already have the colors, and then you can start creating like little pages for all of the little different building blocks. Kind of, you know, how Ty and everyone else were saying earlier, that you really need to have those core elements just very solid, so that once you start creating the larger components, everything starts to grow and look consistent. But it is hard. I mean, starting a new design system to try to figure out what you need and what you don't need. But I think it really starts with just those core elements of typography, color, buttons, making sure you have like error states for fields and their error states and their input states and all of those things. Those will save you a lot of time in the long run.
I also recommend maybe if starting with just a handful of components, like the key ones, like Kelly was suggesting, and not necessarily every one of them, because unless you've built a design system before, and even if you have, I almost guarantee that you're going to need to rebuild them. And so like, because you didn't do something right. And so like, what I would do is build it, think of it as a beta release, try to get people using it, try to get feedback on it. You know, like UX it, you know, think of it as the product, and then iterate, you know. So like start small though, because you're gonna right away see like, oh my gosh, I totally should have made these components like nested so that when I change this, I don't have to change it 50 times. And like, oh, I just learned about like different states of components. And if I had built it that way from the beginning, I would have saved tons of time. So I recommend starting small with just your critical pieces and then deploying it and getting feedback, and then just like trying to grow it and replace them as you get better building systems.
Yeah, I echo that for sure. Go ahead, Ty.
Yeah, and I would also say like have an idea of how it's going to work in production, right? Like, are you going to have a central team of developers that are going to help you with this, or is it going to be fragmented? And if it's fragmented, I would definitely talk to all the development leads and see what's the best way going. Because like there's two models, right? There's a model where you have a central development team that works on all these, and they do all the updates, right? If that doesn't exist, you have to find a way for all the development teams to contribute, as well as like hand off these different objects, and because like they don't want to deal with maintaining the other teams, right? So I think working through that with them and seeing what they want in terms of what you're creating is really important, like down to every detail, like what you're going to call things, just as collaborative as you can be with development. I always recommend that, especially if you're a solo designer, because you don't want to find out things like after you've done a bunch of work and it's not, you know, something's a little bit off by it in terms of how they were thinking of it.
Ty took the words right out of my mouth. That's what I was going to say is before any designer even, and your question I don't think specifies whether designers are going to be using it or just random like people in the company are going to be like mocking things up and using it. Make sure that all of that has been, I don't like approved by dev, but like that they will know what to do with it and can build it. Because if you deliver something that the development team, you know, it doesn't like or can't use, then it's irrelevant, and then you got to go back to the drawing board anyway. So before publishing your library, I would definitely just sync up with your development team for sure.
And also keep a good change log of all the changes you do. I think like the more transparency you have, the better. Like I've seen projects fall apart because like, you know, someone was working isolation, they never said when things changed, and then like people were using it in production, and then like something else changed in the Figma file, and then like nobody knew about it. So I'd like be very like transparent, like keep track of what you're changing and keep people in the know.
Great point. Let me move on to another question. So we have, let's see, what do we have until 7:15, Aaron? Is that right? For audience questions.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Okay. All right. Somebody wants to see your screenshot of the audit, Ty. You have one.
I'm not allowed to share any of my work. I'd say like for an audit, like I don't know, there's probably good examples. If anyone knows of one, please chime in. But like when I do an audit, I just typically try to think about what I'm trying to do, right? Like, so if I'm trying to figure out like a pattern for a card, right? So I'm in the learning or training and certification space. So I'm trying to figure out what's a good pattern for a card. What are all the different stakeholders or products that need to use the concept of a card? So what you can do is pull in all the different types of cards and try to classify them. You can try to, I always deconstruct things. Like this was something I learned working at TurboTax. Like I deconstructed the landing table, which is one of the most complex things. How do you simplify that? So I think it always helps to kind of, if you can pull apart what each of the little things in this complex component means, you can kind of form a view on it, right? Like, so if you look at a card, you might say, these are the main elements, right? There's like an image area. Here's the area where all the data is, and here's all the different types of data. And then you can look at that and compare across all these different sites where I found the cards that I need to consider. There's like 80% of the data is the same. These two have these two outliers. Is that needed, right? And so you can have really meaningful conversations. And the benefit of an audit is that people can make decisions better when they can see things side by side and compare, right? Like you ask someone something and they can compare, it's always a much easier discussion. And so I use audits all the time for things like that. And then it's a more objective conversation versus saying like, I like that or I don't like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, another thing, I guess on that note, we have like decision trees, excuse me, of, like when to use a certain component over another. I guess that's sort of related. Just because there's, sometimes you might think you need like a dialogue, and sometimes you think you might need like a wizard or something. And so it helps kind of get everyone in the organization on board as to, you know, when should you use which thing. And it's just very much a decision tree diagram.
Yeah, anytime you can put things along a spectrum, like I did that at eBay when we worked on this, the concept of a card, because I was working on the eBay Motors app. And so we had different concepts. So like we had a card for discovery, which was like a smaller card. We had a card that was larger when you went into the detail view. So like I use spectrums all the time because it forces me to put things along. It's like a spectrum is essentially a strategy. So if you can articulate that, it's much easier to say like, hey, I thought about this, and B, you know, like it's just a better discussion, right? Like, is this more of a discovery type card that you or activity you're using, or is this more of like a people need to look at the details? So it's going to be like a full width card on the, you know, things like that. It really helps, because otherwise it just becomes like there's too many options, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pamela, I think this next question might be good for you. Is Figma a good tool for facilitating workshops or design challenges? And how can we use this for showing our design process and presenting case studies?
I believe it is. I believe Figma is a great tool for it. I both in Brave Achievers and at ServiceNow, this is usually what we strongly recommend. Because we actually train using Figma in Brave Achievers, it's our go-to tool for training all our brand new designers and those looking to reskill. And the fact that there's such simplicity in learning Figma, I believe it's simple to learn. And we've tried it both here in USA, we've tried it in Europe, and we've tried it in Africa. And what we've found out is that within the first 2 days of boot camp, wherever we're running our boot camps, this is the tool that we ask them to learn to collaborate with. And in every situation, we have seen that people that have never heard the word Figma before, never used FigJam before, within one session, and our sessions are 2 hours, our lectures are 2 hours, they're able to grasp, they're able to articulate, and when we give them homework to do, listing these kind of tasks that you mentioned, they are able to deliver. We've had content writers doing it successfully. We've had project managers doing it successfully, because our track that just finished in Africa is a track of content writers, the technical content writers, project managers, and UX UI designers. And in their first week, they all come together in class to do the same tasks. And every one of them has been able to do what you've said. So, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but yeah, they've used it in ways I can't even begin to explain on this call, to demonstrate, to collaborate, to explain their goals, to explain their processes, to present their capstone projects. So both in Brave Achievers and even in ServiceNow, it's been immeasurably useful. And I'm not saying that because I'm on a Figma call. I strongly believe this. It's absolutely no better way to explain it. Just cool. 3-in-1 tool.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we're just all Figma fanatics here. So next one, Megan, this one is actually for you. Tell us about your experience dealing with designers and developers while building a design system and using it to build software.
Well, that question is actually from one of my coworkers who is, yeah, so that was a targeted question. He is one of the, I guess, I don't know, owners of so we have a few, I mentioned how large HP is before. And so we have several different design systems, and they're kind of tiered out. We have a larger overarching design system, which he works on, and I work and interact with him in order to tell them and that team what we need. And that team is amazing, and they work with us to create and satisfy our individual needs, which is awesome. And then we have other smaller design systems that fit like our print department. And then we have smaller design systems that satisfy each like individual teams and then project needs. So ours is our system of design systems is tiered. And so like I mentioned before, and Ty said it as well, how do you work with developers to build the design system? You work hand in hand with developers to build design systems. I have worked with Jilson to kind of that team is responsible for it, but building out the need for tokens. And so that's that's their responsibility, but you have to ensure that what you are delivering and building in Figma can be used by your dev teams. That's like 101 of a design system. Jilson, does that answer your question?
I guess you guys can talk about it later.
Yeah. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
I guess maybe potentially the last one here, which I think is a really great question. We touched on this earlier, is how do you keep track of the changes that copywriters add? I find that this is a really great question because I feel like content writing is starting to become more and more of a thing than it once was. And so keeping track of, at least for us, of how all these different people have different styles of how they like to work. And, we mentioned earlier, some people get Figma access, some don't. I guess I'll chime in and say for us, yeah, we allow the designers, the content designers, to go in and actually edit the components themselves, not the parent component, but just an instance of it. And I create a little sandbox for them, and I'll just kind of check in one-on-one with them and say, let me know when you're done with whatever content you want to do. And then I'll go in there, look at whatever they did, and then apply all of their content to the final designs. But how about others?
I'll be really quick because I was just talking, but I did respond in the chat to that question because our QA team needs access to past. It is important to have documentation for what it used to be, especially if you're testing or there's any sort of, the dev teams need access to what it has been and when those changes were made. So I don't know I wonder if the Figma their Wayback tool or whatever they call it is designed to handle like copy changes. I wonder if that was their intention with that tool, or just to like a time machine for designs. But we have that copy document Bible on the cloud as like a spreadsheet, so that it's dates of when everything is changed, and then only in Figma do you see what the current copy is.
I know we're running short on time. I'm trying to put some responses into the board, the FigJam board itself, just to try to answer some of the questions that we're not going to be able to get to. So if you guys have access to the board after this call and you want to see if there's an answer, just go in and do it. And I just wanted to let you guys know that some of the answers are in there now.
Perfect.
Or at least my perspective.
I haven't even checked. Let me open it.
I know there's so many.
But
By
I guess
the way,
actually, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if anyone has questions, like specific questions like this, or anything like career questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn, or however you can get my contact info, and I'd be happy to connect with you. So
yeah, I guess with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Aaron for some closing remarks. That's kind of the end of our scheduled time for Q&A. So thanks for all of the questions. And yeah, we'll try to get back to all the other ones that we didn't answer yet.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. That was an amazing panel. It's funny how quickly it always flies by. It's amazing. It's like, oh, it's been an hour and 15 minutes already. Hard to believe, but it's true. It happened. Thank you to all the panelists. Before we wrap up, just to kind of give you an idea of, we're not done yet. What we have is some closing remarks. I want to give everyone, all the panelists, a chance to maybe make some announcements or talk about open positions that they might have or whatever that might be. But also I want to reiterate that we have another event scheduled for December 9th, Friends of Figma. It's virtual. I highly recommend, if you're interested in plugins and kind of learning some new things, that would be a great thing to join. Be sure to join Friends of Figma San Diego as well. That would be excellent. And you know, for us, what we're going to do next is we're going to take a small break after the final announcements, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back. Anybody who wants to stick around, we can create some breakout rooms and just do some networking. I'll open it up so that everybody who's on the call can talk to each other. You could just start conversing, meet new people, talk about maybe some of your more specific challenges. I'll try to break up the panelists depending upon how many people stick around, and we'll keep that open until 8 o'clock. So, you know, it's optional. If you just want to join for the panel, thanks so much for joining. But I know, Pamela, I know you had an announcement about job recs. So I'll hand it to you.
All right, great. Yes, I just put the job rec in the chat. Thank you so much, Aaron. Thanks for the opportunity today. I learned so much. So I do have a job rec that I put in the chat. We had that position open in training and certification. We would love to fill the role before the 4th of November. So if you know anybody in your network, and the role is a UI visual designer, one of the requirements is that whoever applies for the role should be able to use Figma, because that's our main tool, but also it's a very visual role. So less of UX researching and more of UI and visual design. So the link is there. And that's just it. And I would leave us all with what we've all identified today: ability to articulate our design decisions constantly, especially to our stakeholders and the development team, because I think that's one of the critical things in production. So no matter how beautiful the design is, if it doesn't get into anybody's hands, it's kind of, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Pamela. Any of the other panelists have any announcements or anything they want to make?
Intuit is almost certainly hired. We're always hiring. So, you know, just check out the Intuit website, and you can filter by San Diego or wherever you're at, or remote, because there's a lot of remote positions. So, and if something looks like, you know, you want to apply and you don't really know what to do, again, reach out. I'd be happy to give you feedback on your portfolios or your resume or anything like that. So, yeah.
Did I not say Jeremy and I came from somewhere together?
I know. We're like, totally.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'd say the same. Like Amazon's always, everyone knows, I don't need to repeat it. Like Amazon's always hiring. So, you know, I don't think it ever stops. So.
Same with HP. We're huge and we're always hiring. Yeah.
Yep, I think that's the cool thing about having large companies here. We know that they're always hiring, and I think that's great for the San Diego Figma community, or wherever you might be. I know we had a lot of people joining from around the country and world as well. I just want to go through and, you know, thanks again, Kelly, for facilitating the great panel. Thanks, Megan, Ty, Jeremy, and Pamela. It was awesome having you. Thank you so much. We'll conclude that now, the panel portion. We'll take a break. We'll come back in about 7:25 for networking. So if you want to stick around, hang out. We'll be back in a minute. Thanks, everybody.